Welcome to the Business of Property podcast. I'm Simon.
I'm Stuart.
We're both property people running our own businesses. This podcast is just us chatting, as we often do, about anything and everything property. Now, I've seen some anecdotal, again, reports of estate agents only allowing viewings if they've seen a mortgage offer in principle, or a decision in principle, I think is the phrase I saw people reporting on. So you actually have to have the basic agreements for your mortgage outlined with a lender before you can even go and look at a house. This is presumably largely a COVID precaution, so that you don't get people traipsing through houses unnecessarily. But I think it's also probably quite an interesting qualifier for agents as well to avoid wasting time. However, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think, apart from my personal purchase, when I've been doing buy-to-lets, I don't think I've ever had a mortgage decision in principle or offer in principle prior to starting viewing. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to affect me. But on a personal level, Stuart, I think you've come across something very similar in your recent explorations of your own personal property purchasing. So do you want to tell us a bit about that experience?
Yeah, so we are looking at buying a new build property. In fact, we are at the stage where we've agreed an offer on it. And they too ask for an agreement in principle or a decision in principle, as other people might have heard it, so an AIP or a DIP. And just listening to you there, I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking, I don't feel too strongly about that being requested, because I think, like you say, in the current climate where we are supposed to be socially distancing and limiting chances of exposure, that it probably helps to qualify people to make sure that those people you are letting through the doors, so to speak, are people that are serious. You don't want people that just have a bit of time on their hands on a Saturday afternoon thinking, we haven't got anything else to do, let's go and have a look at a property, which I'm sure there's not a lot of that goes on. So I don't think I'm solely against that. The issue I had, in addition to that, was that I was told that we couldn't go and view the property. Bear in mind now, we're talking new build, we're talking the dress houses at the front. And we were told that we couldn't arrange or book a viewing of that house until we had been through their brokers and had been qualified via their brokers. At which point I said, well, it's fine because I have a broker and I already have an agreement in principle, actually. So I was already set up, and it's something I do often have anyway, just because of the amount of different things that's going on.
Always good to have a mortgage offer in your back pocket when you're walking around.
Yeah, and
just
we do
in everyday life.
and as an investor, it's quite handy when someone says, "Well, you'll need this, that, and the other," and I just say, "Well, I've got it now. I'll just email it across to you." And I think it does give them that sense that you aren't a time waster and that you are someone that's serious about doing what you do. But anyway, so I responded and said, "Well, I've already got an AIP, so I'm good." And I was told in no uncertain terms, "No, you have to go through our brokers, and once they've qualified you, we will then let you have a viewing." Which, as you know, because I sent you a little note, and let's just say it probably contained an expletive.
Yes, language a little too colourful for recording today.
But we're a family show, so which I just think, if the Competitions and Markets Authority gets a hold of it, or someone starts making a fuss about it, which may well be me if I get the time to tell someone that will actually listen and or cares. But I just think it's very anti-competitive to now start forcing people. So the point you made at the start is having an IIP. Now, you may have a different view. Other people might have a different view that, well, actually, we just want to go and have a look at a property. Why can't we do that without the formal documentation? And again, I wouldn't strongly disagree with that point of view either. But to say you have to go through the house builder's broker, which, as we know, they're just setting things up to develop their own little ecosystem.
Yeah, and I don't think they can as easily fall back on the COVID precaution response either, because there's no one living in these properties that you're going to look around. They're show homes. So you're not really putting anyone's home at risk. So it seems very, very dodgy, if you ask me.
Well, let's not sail off into the digression of the COVID, but I will just say that COVID did get mentioned again as part of it, and I was just thinking this has got nothing to do with COVID. But they're saying, we have to do this because COVID's here and we need to be. And I was thinking, well, it's not related, but like I say, we could,
just a good excuse.
Yeah.
So anyway, despite these barriers, I think you do have some exciting news.
Yeah, but the good news is we stroke my wife really liked the property. Strangely enough, there were two types of property that we were looking at, both of which served our needs in terms of provided a room for each of the kids and so on and so forth. But my wife was umming and ahhing about which one she liked and ummed and ahed for several days. Well, we both did. And of course, the one that we then landed on the day we put a call into reserve was the day that someone had an hour before reserved it. So,
oh no.
However, it was such a close line. It was one of those where it was good in a way because it forced us to then make the decision, say, okay, we will put an offer on the other house type. So we're really happy and we're looking forward to it. It's nice to have it in there. The challenges I've mentioned before on the podcast is that the house builder again was very vocal at the start, said it won't be built until at least May or June, so that they'd removed any shadow of a doubt in our heads that we could benefit from the stamp duty holiday. And of course, now we've got all of the paperwork back, or the starting of the paperwork. The first thing it says is that the house will be built between April the 1st and April the 30th. So,
so close. So
we're now convinced that, of course, that the messaging was just don't even think about trying to push us to get it. But
so now you've got to swap to lobbying your MP for an extension to the holiday.
Yeah, which is why selfishly I praying for it. Of course, whatever is right for the country is of benefit. But if it helps us save a few grand, that would be great. Because as I've bored people with on this show before, we still have to pay the 3% on the the first 500 and so on and so forth. So. But no, it's really positive news. It's really good news.
Well, congratulations on choosing your new home.
Thank you. Just got to find the money to buy it now. Hopefully, no house builders are listening to this.
Yeah. So you passed a broker's test, did you? Together?
Yes.
Okay, don't worry.
It's all above board. So,
in other news, I think before we see what other updates you've got, I'll slip my update in because it's very short. The property that I'm selling, the buyer wanted to do a full survey despite them being a cash buyer. So they went through that, and the full survey took place. And unfortunately, the results from that are that they have found some signs of damp. We don't know the details of the damp as yet. But the buyer has decided to commission a further damp specialist to do a damp survey on the property. So that's now, we are awaiting that to happen, and then the resulting, I suspect, negotiation to come after that. But hopefully it's nothing too major. And it is quite an old property, so it's only a solid wall property. So we're not too surprised that they've managed to find the odd bit of damp here and there. If they look hard enough, I'm sure there's several. So we'll wait and see what comes back from the damp survey.
And it's a fairly old property, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very old. 1800s, I think it was built somewhere in there. It used to be owned by the railway for the station master at a nearby station, which no longer exists. But the house still does, obviously.
And is the buyer an investor, or is it a residential purchase?
No, they're buying it as a residential property. Apparently, they're planning to put some effort into, I say restoring, but I'm not sure restoring is quite the right word because they're still there, but bringing to the fore the period features and sort of the history of the property. So I hope they'll do some nice things with it. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with that happening, because another possibility for this plot was that someone would buy it and knock this house down and put 2 or 3 in a terrace, or perhaps even a small block of flats, if they could get the planning for it. So seeing as I quite like the history of the property, I quite like the idea that someone's going to look after it.
Yeah, it's great, and hopefully all goes well with the damp. But as you say, I think worst case scenario is it's going to be a point of negotiation.
Yeah, quite. I think, given a lot of what we've been talking about recently, though, it's interesting to note that we're now, 2 months-ish into this purchase, and we're still having surveys being done. And then there might be a little bit of price negotiation after that. This just goes to show that these things are going slowly at the moment. I mean, it takes a while for each of these surveys to be booked in and scheduled with all the people who need to be there and to allow access to the property and what have you, and then for it to happen, and then the results to go back to the buyer and for them to interpret it, and now in this case to now book an extra survey. And it just shows it takes time to buy a property.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope we probably started early enough not to worry about missing the stamp duty holiday deadline. But yeah, people starting now, it's going to be difficult.
No, I completely agree. And I have to say that my early optimism has dissipated somewhat in terms of when our properties will be sold. So we've, as mentioned before, we've got two that are sale agreed. But where I was hopeful that it'd be done in, I would think a couple of months. I was saying sort of 6 to 8 weeks. But
I think you said this year, certainly. So
this year, yeah. But I think realistically, my hope is that they just get sold. If I'm being completely honest, for me, it's to make sure we get them through. If they go through by January, I'll be really happy. But ultimately, they need to just go through. And from the buyer's perspective, of course, they want the stamp duty, and that's my hope. Is that I'm hoping that the stamp duty holiday means that we are safer, relatively speaking, in terms of having a buyer pull out. Now, I should touch every piece of wood as I say that.
Yeah, because if they pull out, then they don't have enough time left to find another property and still complete on it in that window of holiday time.
Because one of them, like yours, is a cash buyer, but they're an investor. And when we're talking about a few $100,000, we're not like yours. We're not talking about small sums of money. We're talking about quite big sums of money to then have to uproot and change. And given the stamp duty holiday, that's a significant saving as well. So yeah, that's that one. And for the other property, the studio flat, likewise, it's a mortgage. It's a lower loan to value, but again, significant savings on the stamp duty. So I'm hoping that just keeps them in a bit. But like you, one of the properties is in a serviced and managed building, so we've got to have the management packs. They've been requested. They've got those, and inquiries being done. So because I'm an optimistic person, I was hopeful that we could get it done before Christmas. But I think the realist in me is now saying, let's just keep pushing the process and hope that it gets through. The other point that I just wanted to make that I think you've brought out is I was looking at some figures on the house price index on Rightmove, and it's saying that the average time to sell at the moment is the quickest it's ever been. It's quickest it's been in the last 4 years, which is at 50 days to sell. And that in itself sounds really positive, doesn't it? But those stats are you've marketed a property and you've sold in 50
that's the
days.
Start of the process, isn't it?
Exactly. You haven't begun. The fun only begins once you get that sale agreed, as we both know. We're now negotiating that.
Yeah, quite.
And just on that subject, the other thing that I wanted to mention was that there are more sales agreed at this point in this year than there were in 2019. So that's kind of demonstrating that there is more activity. So yes, there was pent-up demand because nothing happened in May and June, but we are now surpassing last year's level. So we're now past pent-up demand. We're in new territory with with the stamp duty holiday, which we've all mentioned 101 times, but that's showing that there is more happening than ever before. And therefore, as per our conversation with Emma, we know that there's going to be sticking points, and it's going to start with conveyancing.
Yeah, I think that the stats you've got here, you've actually put in our preparation notes.
I'm getting professional.
Was that in October, there are 418,000 property sales in the pipeline. And that compares to 280,000 at the same point in 2019. Now, that's a lot of extra properties. So it's hardly surprising that solicitors and surveyors and mortgage brokers are struggling a little under the load from all those extra properties. I mean, that's I don't know, what is it, 140,000 extra properties? Did I do that maths right? No, did that maths wrong, didn't I? 240,000. Blimey.
I was going to say it's almost double, isn't it? It's almost double in basic maths.
Oh dear, my mental arithmetic's not really up to calculating on the go in a podcast.
Well, it's 138, so it's about 50% up. It's about 50% up. Yeah, it is 50%.
So some very busy people in the industry trying to deal with all that.
And like your experience, you're going to have surveys that come up, and roofs and damp and whatever else may come up that's going to exacerbate these processes. So it'd be interesting to see, as we've talked about before, how the government manages that, because there will be people that say, well, hold on, we started our process in end of October, for example, and we're still going through the process. Like I said before, I think maybe it will come down to who's exchanged, because you can potentially exchange earlier, but most of what you need to have done needs to be buttoned down by then. But
exactly, yeah.
I have exchanged very quickly on a property before. I mean, my personal experience, again, this was an investment property, but I have exchanged on a property in a matter of weeks and paid an agreed fee, and I didn't complete for a year, because once the exchange has happened, the vendor has the confidence and the comfort of knowing that the property will be sold, because obviously we are unique in this country where we have this thing called gazumping. And when you exchange, at least both parties have the confidence that it's going to happen. You can then set the time frame. Of course, I'm not suggesting anyone wants to stretch it for a year, but if you've exchanged, we know there's a legal requirement on that sale to go through, unless significant penalties are going to be paid. So that could be one way of looking at it. But I think you pointed out before, they couldn't extend it to allow the sales to go through, because where would that end? You would just keep extending, because we're going to have this glut until the holiday ceases. So interesting to see where it will go.
Although if they do it at the last minute, which seems to be something they're keen on at the moment, announcing things at the last minute, and that means that everyone will have slowed down. They will have assumed that they can't get a sale through, so those sales will have new ones will have stopped accumulating at the same rate, and I dare say some of the existing ones will sort of fall through under the expectation of not making it. But then if they extend it by a month or something with a few weeks left, then there's no time for everyone to suddenly go out and say, well, hey, let's buy a house, because it's just not feasible. You can't do it that fast. It's not going to have any meaningful effect on the property market generally. It would just help out people who are currently in the process.
Yeah. I think initially when you were talking about it, I think there's an argument to say that would be why you couldn't extend, for those reasons, that a lot of people have felt a lot of pressure, and then to the day say, oh, it's okay, you can have an extra 4 weeks. But trying to second guess the government is beyond my level of expertise.
Yeah, I can't imagine that they won't do some kind of extension. That's definitely. I mean, Emma was very unsure last week, but and I'm also not sure. But I think that's likely to be the way it comes down. But who knows? We'll just have to wait and see.
It may be because I so desperately want it. My head has just discounted it completely, so that I'm not disappointed. So I've just accepted it. I've reached the level of acceptance, and therefore my view is no, it can't happen, because
That's a defense mechanism.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah. But hopefully both you and Emma will be correct.
So there's just one other stat in this little collection that you put in our notes that I thought I'd mention. And that was in a normal year, only 25% of sales agreed in the first quarter complete by the end of March. So if we unpack that a little bit, generally speaking, at the beginning of the year, the property market is a bit slow. So we're talking about mostly properties that have sold from middle of January onwards. If we're saying that it takes on average 3 months, then anything that starts that late into the quarter, we would expect to not complete in that quarter. So I think 25%, a quarter of sales agreed in that sort of 2.5 month window, most likely, actually managed to complete within that 2.5 months. I think that's actually not too bad. And I have a feeling you put this in here as a sort of, well, what do we expect for if it's only 25% in a normal year? What do we expect in this year? It's going to be even worse. But I think 25% is actually quite good when you look at it. That's actually quite a short time. And of course, when you're looking at all sales agreed in that period, some of those will have been agreed 3 days before the end of March. So of course they're not going to complete in that first quarter. So yeah, I think 25% seems quite high to me.
I think the key point is, I think it is about how many sales have started in January, because clearly if 90% of the sales were agreed in March, then I'd have expected none to have completed. But of course, the more that happened in January. So it'll be about the balance. I think it was because I think 1 in 4. I think that's not bad for January. For a January agreement, I think if you offered that to most people, they'd take it. I certainly would. If you said, "Well, we're going to start in January and complete March," I think, well, that'd be bloody brilliant. You know, in a normal environment. But
right.
I think for me, the point will be at which point all of the various professionals that involved in the selling of property, from estate agents through conveyances, through surveyors, etc., at which point they say, we now can put our hand up and say, this won't complete. And my sort of feeling is that will happen early December, mid-December, just to say, okay, nothing else is going to go through. That's my feeling, that if they're going to handle it professionally, that's what should happen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think some people have already been saying that. And certainly there's been lots of press saying that. So yeah, I think the professional bodies or the professional people will, as you say, definitely put a hard line in and say, that's it. If you're starting now, it's not going to be done in time.
Yeah. When I put that stat in, I just thought it was an interesting stat, because I hadn't even given it any thought before we experienced this, to see that 25% would happen by the end of March. I just thought, it was interesting. I
agree. It is interesting. It's I'm quite surprised it's that high, as I said. So I think it's a very interesting stat. Well, I think we are out of time, aren't we, Stuart? Unless there's anything else you want to squeeze in before we finish up.
No, I think we're all good.
Fantastic. So in that case, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening. And if you've been enjoying it, which we hope you have, please do let someone else know about us. And you can point them and find show notes at thebusinessofproperty.com. And we'll talk to you again next week.